Every morning at 5:30 a.m., a Navy SEAL walked into the same roadside cafe. And every morning, he paid for the breakfast of a poor elderly woman who counted coins just to afford oatmeal. He never told her, never asked for thanks. To everyone else, she was invisible. But on day 36, 4 bodyguards walked through the door, followed by 2 lawyers in $1,000 suits. They walked straight to her table and called her by a name that made the entire room go silent. What happened next proved that sometimes the person you think you are saving has been watching you all along. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you appreciate stories about quiet kindness and unexpected truth, consider subscribing. Because what this SEAL was about to discover would change everything he thought he knew about the woman in Booth 7. Harlow's Diner sat 3 miles east of Naval Base Coronado, a weather-beaten relic that had survived decades through sheer stubbornness. The building leaned slightly to the left, its faded yellow paint peeling in long strips that curled away from the wood like old skin. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and fryer grease that had seeped into the walls over 30 years of breakfast rushes. Cracked vinyl booths lined the windows, their red surfaces patched with duct tape in a dozen places. The floor tiles were supposed to be white once, but time and foot traffic had turned them the color of old newspapers. At exactly 05:30 hours every morning, the bell above the door chimed as Ezra Calloway stepped inside. He was early 30s, lean in the way that came from functional strength rather than vanity. His civilian clothes hung loose on his frame, a faded gray hoodie and jeans that had seen better days. But there was something in the way he carried himself that civilian clothes could never quite hide. His posture was too straight, his awareness too sharp, his movements too economical. He scanned the room in half a second, cataloging exits and occupants without appearing to look at anything at all. The morning regulars barely glanced up. Gordon, a long-haul trucker with a gut that tested the limits of his flannel shirt, sat in his usual spot near the kitchen, working through a plate of eggs and hash browns. 2 construction workers occupied a corner booth, speaking in low voices over coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. Behind the counter, Raina moved with the efficient exhaustion of someone who had worked the opening shift for so long that her body went through the motions while her mind was somewhere else entirely. Ezra walked to booth number 4 without hesitation. The same booth every morning. He slid onto the cracked vinyl and set his keys on the table, aligned with the edge out of habit. Raina appeared 30 seconds later with a coffee pot and a mug that had a chip in the rim. She poured without asking, without speaking, because after 3 weeks of the exact same order at the exact same time, words had become unnecessary. He wrapped both hands around the mug and stared out the window at the parking lot. His truck sat in the same spot he always chose, backed into the space with a clear view of the entrance. The Ford Ranger was 15 years old, its paint oxidized to a dull red that might have been bright once. A car seat sat in the back, pink and purple with cartoon characters he could not name. A stuffed rabbit was buckled into it, its ear bent at an angle that his daughter insisted was how the rabbit liked to sleep. Booth number 7 was already occupied when Ezra arrived. It was always occupied. The woman sat with her back to the wall, her hands folded on the table in front of her. She wore the same gray cardigan every morning, 3 buttons down the front, one of them missing so that the fabric gaped slightly at her chest. Beneath it was a floral dress that had faded to colors that no longer had names. Her shoes were canvas, the kind that came from a discount store, and the sole on the right one had separated from the upper so that it flapped slightly when she walked. She was somewhere in her late 60s, though it was hard to tell. Her face had the worn quality of someone who had spent too much time outside, too much time with not enough food, too much time carrying weight that had nothing to do with pounds. Her hair was gray and thin, pulled back in a bun that was coming loose. Her hands rested on a Ziploc bag filled with coins. Raina approached her table with the careful neutrality of someone who had learned not to make assumptions. The woman opened the Ziploc bag and began counting coins onto the table, quarters, dimes, nickels, pennies. She separated them into small piles, her fingers moving with a precision that seemed at odds with the tremor in her hands. When she finished counting, she looked up at Raina and spoke in a voice so quiet it barely carried across the table. Oatmeal, no fruit, the cheapest item on the menu. $2.75. Raina wrote it down on her pad, even though she did not need to. The woman ordered the same thing every morning, had ordered the same thing every morning for 7 years, according to the manager. Raina collected the coins from the table, counting them twice to make sure, and walked back to the kitchen. Ezra watched this exchange from booth number 4. He had been watching it for 3 weeks now, ever since he started stopping at Harlow's on his way to the base. The first morning, he had noticed her only because she was so still. Everyone else in the diner moved, fidgeted, checked their phones, talked. She sat like a statue, hands folded, staring at nothing. The second morning, he noticed the coins. The third morning, he noticed the shoes. By the end of the first week, he could not stop noticing her. There was something wrong about the whole picture, not wrong in a suspicious way, wrong in a way that made his chest tight. She did not belong in this diner the way Gordon belonged here, the way the construction workers belonged here. They were here because it was convenient, because it was cheap, because it was routine. She was here because she had nowhere else to go. On day 3, Ezra paid his bill and left. Raina picked up the cash from his table and found a $10 bill folded underneath his coffee mug. Tucked inside, the fold was a napkin with 4 words written in neat block letters. For booth 7. Anonymous. Raina looked up, but Ezra was already gone. She stood there for a moment, holding the $10, then walked to booth 7. She set a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of the woman without saying anything. The woman looked at the plate, then up at Raina. I did not order this. Someone called ahead, said to bring you breakfast. I do not know anyone who would do that. Raina shrugged. Well, someone did. The woman stared at the eggs for a long time. Then she picked up her fork and began to eat. She ate slowly, carefully, making each bite last. When she finished, she folded the napkin from the table and put it in her cardigan pocket. On day 7, it happened again. And again on day 9. By day 12, Raina stopped pretending someone had called ahead. She just brought the food and set it down. The woman stopped protesting. She ate what was given to her and said nothing. Ezra never acknowledged it. He paid his bill, left the extra cash folded under his mug, and walked out without looking back. If the woman knew it was him, she gave no sign. If Raina knew for certain, she never said. It became a silent transaction, repeated every morning with the precision of a ritual. The construction workers never noticed. Gordon never noticed. The manager, a man named Hale, who spent most of his time in the back office doing math that never quite added up, never noticed. The woman in booth 7 remained as invisible as she had been before Ezra started paying for her food. The only difference was that now she ate eggs instead of oatmeal. Ezra's mornings followed the same pattern. Wake at 045, shower, dress. Check on Poet, his 5-year-old daughter, still asleep in her room with the nightlight shaped like a crescent moon. Leave the apartment at 05:15, stop at Harlow's at 05:30, coffee, 15 minutes of silence. Leave at 05:45, drive to Little Explorers Daycare, drop off Poet at 0600, arrive at the base by 0615. The routine was everything. The routine kept the chaos at bay. The routine meant he did not have to think about the divorce papers sitting on his kitchen counter. The routine meant he did not have to think about Sienna's voice on the phone last week, calm and measured, telling him she was remarrying. The routine meant he did not have to think about the lawyer she hired, or the custody arrangement she wanted, or the fact that his entire life was about to be decided by people who had never seen him read Poet a bedtime story, or braid her hair, or teach her how to tie her shoes. On day 14, something changed. Ezra sat in booth 4 with his coffee, watching the parking lot the way he always did. His eyes tracked movement automatically, a sedan pulling in, a man in a suit getting out, 2 birds fighting over a piece of bread near the dumpster. Normal, routine, safe. Then his gaze drifted to booth 7. The woman was reaching for her coffee cup, her hand extended across the table, fingers wrapping around the ceramic. And in that moment, Ezra saw something he had not noticed before: control. Her hand did not shake, did not tremble. The movement was precise, measured, the way someone moved when they had been trained to move that way. She lifted the cup, brought it to her lips, sipped, set it back down. All of it smooth, economical. The tremor he thought he had seen before was gone. He watched her more carefully now. The way she held her fork, the way she cut her toast into exact squares before eating, the way she folded her napkin along perfect creases when she finished. These were not the movements of someone broken by poverty. These were the movements of someone who had been taught that precision mattered. Raina appeared at his table with the coffee pot. She refilled his mug without asking. "How long has she been coming here?" Raina followed his gaze to booth 7. "Longer than I have, and I have been here 6 years. Every day, every single day. Never missed one, not even Christmas." "Where does she go after?" Raina shrugged. "No idea. She just leaves and disappears. I tried following her once, a couple years back. Thought maybe she needed help or something. She walks. That is all I know. Just walks." "Walks where?" Raina shook her head. "Lost her after 4 blocks. She turned a corner and was just gone." Ezra stared at booth 7. The woman was staring out the window now, her face blank, her eyes focused on something far beyond the parking lot. For just a moment, she turned her head. Her eyes met his. The contact lasted less than a second. Then she looked away. But in that second, Ezra saw something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Awareness. Sharp, focused awareness. The kind that came from training, from discipline, from a life spent watching and being watched. This was not a woman who had been defeated by circumstance. This was a woman who had chosen to be here. He finished his coffee and left. In the truck, driving toward the daycare, he could not shake the image of her eyes. Poet was awake in her car seat, humming a song she had learned at school. She stopped humming and leaned forward as far as the straps would let her. "Daddy, why do we always stop at that place?" Ezra kept his eyes on the road. "Because some places remind you what matters." "What matters?" He did not answer. He did not know how. On day 18, Ezra did something he had never done before. He followed her. Not closely, not obviously. He stayed in his truck, parked on the street, engine off. The woman left Harlow's at Zeus 6:20, the same time she always left. She walked. East on Bancroft, moving at a steady pace that never varied. No hesitation at intersections, no checking over her shoulder, just steady, purposeful movement. Ezra followed at a distance, keeping 2 blocks between them. She walked for 4 miles, past strip malls and auto shops and apartment complexes with chain-link fences. She never slowed down, never stopped. After 40 minutes, she turned into the parking lot of the Coronado Public Library. The library was a low brick building with narrow windows and a flat roof. It opened at 7 in the morning for early patrons, mostly homeless people looking for a place to sit that was not the street. The woman walked through the front door and disappeared inside. Ezra parked across the street and waited. At 07:30, he got out of the truck and walked to the library entrance. Through the glass doors, he could see her. She sat in the reading room at a table near the back. There were no books in front of her, no newspaper, no laptop. She just sat with her hands folded on the table, staring straight ahead. He watched her for 5 minutes. She did not move. Ezra checked his watch. He was going to be late for training. He walked back to his truck and drove to the base, but the image of her sitting in that library stayed with him all day. During drills, during briefings, during the 2-mile run that left his lungs burning and his legs screaming. She sat in his mind like a puzzle with missing pieces. That night, after he put Poet to bed, Ezra sat at his kitchen table with his laptop. He opened a search engine and typed 2 words, Ashford Holdings. The results filled his screen, news articles, financial reports, legal documents. He clicked on the first article, dated 6 years ago. Ashford Holdings fraud scandal, executive board charged, heiress vanishes. He read quickly, his eyes scanning the text. Ashford Holdings, a multi-billion-dollar industrial conglomerate, was rocked by accusations of fraud and embezzlement. The executive board, led by CEO Richard Marlowe, allegedly orchestrated a scheme to siphon assets from the company and its primary shareholder, Vivian Ashford, sole heir to the Ashford fortune. Ms. Ashford, 61 at the time, disappeared from public view shortly after filing a lawsuit against the board. Her whereabouts remain unknown. Legal experts estimate the stolen assets exceed $3 billion. Ezra scrolled down. There was a photograph. Black and white, slightly grainy. A woman in her 60s, standing in front of a courthouse. Elegant suit, perfect posture, eyes that stared directly into the camera with the kind of intensity that made you feel like she could see through the lens. He zoomed in on the photograph. The eyes. His breath caught. The same eyes. He clicked through more articles. The scandal had played out over 2 years. Criminal charges, civil suits, appeals. The executive board was convicted, sentences ranging from 10 to 20 years. The assets were frozen pending the outcome of the civil case. But Vivian Ashford never appeared in court again. After the initial filing, she vanished. Some articles speculated she had fled the country. Others suggested she had died. No one knew. The last article was dated 8 months ago. Ashford Holdings case. Nears. Resolution, appeals court to rule on asset recovery. Ezra closed the laptop. He sat in the dark kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, thinking about a woman who had lost everything and chosen to disappear rather than fight for it. Or maybe she had fought. Maybe she was still fighting. And maybe sitting in a roadside diner every morning, invisible to everyone, was part of that fight. On day 21, Gordon ruined everything. It was a busy morning. The construction crews had doubled because of a project at the base, and Harlow's was packed. Every booth was full. People stood near the door waiting for tables. The noise level rose to a dull roar, voices overlapping, dishes clattering, the kitchen fan rattling in its housing. Gordon sat in his usual spot, working through a plate of biscuits and gravy. He was loud on a normal day. On a busy day, he was unbearable. He talked to anyone within earshot, his voice carrying over the noise like he was narrating his own life. The woman in booth 7 sat in her usual spot, hands folded, staring at nothing. She had finished her eggs 10 minutes ago, but had not left yet. She never left until 6:20. Routine was everything. Gordon's voice cut through the noise. He was talking to one of the construction workers, a younger guy with a shaved head and a Marine's tattoo on his forearm. I am just saying, you want to run a business, you got to think about atmosphere. Ambiance, you know? The construction worker grunted, not really listening. Gordon gestured around the diner. Look at this place. It is falling apart. Hale does not give a damn. You know what would help? Standards. You got to have standards. He took a bite of biscuit, chewed, swallowed. Then he looked directly at booth 7. Like, why is she even here? No offense, but the place smells like goodwill when she walks in. The construction worker looked uncomfortable. Gordon kept going. I mean, there are shelters for that, programs and stuff. She does not need to be sitting here making people uncomfortable. Raina was at the counter, her head snapped up. Shut it, Gordon, I am just saying. Well, do not. Gordon shrugged, unbothered. Bad for business. That is all I am saying. Ezra was in booth 4. He had been staring out the window, half listening to the noise around him. But when Gordon spoke, something inside him went cold and sharp. He set his coffee cup down, stood, walked across the diner. Gordon did not notice until Ezra was standing at his table. The construction worker noticed first. He saw Ezra coming and straightened in his seat, recognition flickering across his face. Marines recognized each other. So did operators. Gordon looked up, annoyed. Yeah? Ezra did not say anything. He just stared. His face was blank, his posture relaxed. But there was something in his eyes that made Gordon's mouth snap shut. The diner went quiet. Not completely. People were still talking at the other end, but the area around Gordon's booth fell into silence. Ezra reached into his pocket, pulled out a $20 bill, set it on the table in front of Gordon. For your coffee and your silence. Gordon stared at the 20. Then at Ezra. His face went red. Listen, man, I was just saying that. Ezra turned and walked back to booth 4. He sat down, picked up his coffee, drank. Gordon sat there, frozen, the $20 bill on the table in front of him. The construction worker looked down at his plate, suddenly very interested in his eggs. Across the diner, the woman in booth 7 was watching. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes followed Ezra as he sat back down. For the first time in 3 weeks, something like recognition passed across her features. Then it was gone. She stood, gathered her Ziploc bag, and walked out. The bell above the door chimed as she left. On day 24, Poet came with him. It was Ezra's custody week. Sienna had agreed to the temporary schedule while the lawyers worked out the details of the divorce. 1 week with him, 1 week with her. It was supposed to be fair, but it felt like being cut in half over and over again. Poet sat across from him in booth 4, coloring on the paper placemat with crayons Raina had brought from somewhere in the back. She hummed while she colored, a tuneless sound that filled the space between them. Ezra drank his coffee and watched her. She had Sienna's eyes, dark and wide, but everything else was his. The stubborn set of her jaw, the way she focused on things with total intensity, the way she asked questions that had no easy answers. She stopped coloring and looked up. "Daddy, why does not the sad lady smile?" Ezra followed her gaze. The woman in booth 7 was eating her eggs, her face as blank as always. Maybe she forgot how. "Can we help her remember?" His throat tightened. "I do not know, sweetheart." Poet considered this. Then she slid out of the booth and walked across the diner before Ezra could stop her. She stopped at booth 7 and held out a piece of paper. The woman looked down. It was a drawing, a stick figure with a triangle dress and a circle head. The stick figure was smiling. Next to it was a flower with 5 petals, each one colored a different color. The woman stared at the drawing. Her hands resting on the table began to tremble. She looked at Poet. "What is your name?" "Poet." The woman's eyes filled. "That is a beautiful name. My daddy says names should mean something." "He is right." Poet smiled and ran back to Ezra. The woman carefully folded the drawing, creasing it along perfect lines, and put it in her cardigan pocket. Ezra watched this happen with a feeling he could not name, something between grief and hope. On day 26, the woman left. Something behind. She stood to leave at 06:20, the same time she always left. She gathered her Ziploc bag, her napkin, her dignity. But when she walked away, a piece of paper remained on the booth, half hidden under the edge of the table. Ezra saw it. He waited until she was gone, then walked over. It was a legal document, water-stained and creased from being folded and unfolded too many times. The text was partially obscured, but 3 words stood out in bold print. Ashford Holdings, Plaintiff, Reinstatement. Ezra picked it up, turned it over. On the back, in handwriting that was precise and controlled, were 3 words. "They are coming." He set the paper back down exactly where he found it, walked back to booth 4, finished his coffee, left. But the words stayed with him. That night, he searched again. This time, he went deeper. Court filings, legal briefs, appeals documents. The case had dragged on for 6 years, tangled in jurisdictional disputes and procedural delays. But 3 months ago, something had changed. The Federal Court of Appeals had agreed to hear the case. Oral arguments were scheduled. A decision was expected within weeks. Ezra read until his eyes burned. When he finally closed the laptop, it was past midnight. On day 29, Ezra started paying for everything, not just breakfast. When the woman ordered water, Raina brought soup. When she ordered coffee, Raina brought a sandwich. The woman stopped protesting. She ate what was given and said nothing. On day 31, Hale noticed. He came out of his office during the morning rush and stood behind the counter, watching. His eyes tracked Raina as she brought food to booth 7, tracked Ezra as he left cash under his mug, tracked the woman as she ate in silence. Gordon was there too. He leaned over to Hale and said something Ezra could not hear. Hale nodded, his face thoughtful. Ezra did not care. Let them notice. Let them talk. It did not matter. On day 33, Sienna served him with official custody papers. He was at the base when the courier arrived, signed for the envelope without thinking, opened it in his truck during lunch. The terms were laid out in cold legal language: supervised visitation, weekends only. Sienna's new husband, Marcus, would be listed as a co-guardian. The hearing was scheduled in 12 days. Ezra sat in the truck, staring at the papers, his hands shaking. He thought about Poet, about reading her stories before bed, about braiding her hair in the mornings, about teaching her to ride a bike in the parking lot of their apartment complex. He thought about losing all of it. That night, he did not sleep. On day 34, the woman spoke to him for the first time. Ezra was sitting in booth 4, staring at nothing. The custody papers were folded in his jacket pocket. He had read them so many times he had memorized every word. The woman stood up from booth 7, walked across the diner, stopped at his table. Her voice was quiet, but there was strength in it, an accent buried under years of gravel, old money, East Coast. The kind of voice that came from boarding schools and charity galas. You do not have to. Ezra looked up. Her eyes were steady, clear, unafraid. I know. Then why? He thought about Poet asking why the sad lady did not smile. He thought about the custody papers. He thought about all the things slipping through his fingers no matter how hard he tried to hold on. Because I can. She nodded, almost smiled. What is your daughter's name? Poet. She is lucky. I am the lucky one. The woman's expression shifted. Something like sadness, something like recognition. Not many people think that way anymore. She turned and walked back to booth 7, gathered her things, left. Ezra watched her go. Raina appeared with the coffee pot. You okay? He nodded, lied. That afternoon, Ezra drove past the library on his way to pick up Poet. He did not plan to stop, but when he saw the black SUV parked in the lot, he pulled over. 2 men in suits stood near the entrance. Earpieces, rigid posture, security. Ezra watched them from across the street. The library doors opened. The woman came out. She saw the men. Her face went pale. She turned and walked in the opposite direction, moving quickly now, her earlier control slipping. One of the men spoke into his wrist. The other followed her at a distance. Ezra started his truck. He did not know what was happening, but he knew what fear looked like, and for the first time in 7 years, the woman in booth 7 was afraid. If this story made you feel something, if you have ever wondered about the invisible people around you, share your thoughts below. And if you want more stories like this, stories about quiet acts that change everything, consider subscribing. Because what happens next will show you that sometimes the people we think need saving are the ones who save us. On day 35, Ezra broke his own rule. He followed the men in suits. The black SUV pulled out of the library parking lot, heading south on Orange Avenue. Ezra stayed 3 cars back, his hands steady on the wheel even though his pulse was hammering. The SUV moved with purpose, no hesitation at intersections, no circling back to check for tails. Professional drivers. The kind that came with serious money or serious trouble. They drove for 20 minutes, past the tourist areas and into a neighborhood Ezra did not recognize. Old Coronado. Houses that had been there since before the naval base, before the hotels, before the city grew up around the island. The SUV slowed and pulled into the parking lot of a law office. Small building, brick facade, brass nameplate by the door. Torino and Associates. Ezra drove past without slowing. In his rearview mirror, he saw the 2 men get out of the SUV and enter the building. They did not look around, did not check their surroundings. They were not looking for threats. They were looking for someone specific. And they had not found her. Ezra circled the block twice, then parked on a side street with a view of the entrance. He waited. 20 minutes passed. The men came out, got back in the SUV, and drove away. Ezra sat in his truck for another 10 minutes, staring at the law office. Then he pulled out his phone and searched for Torino and Associates. The website was minimal: corporate law, estate planning, high-profile civil litigation. No photos of the staff, no testimonials, just a phone number and an address. He put the phone away and drove to the daycare to pick up Poet. She was waiting by the front window, her backpack almost as big as she was. When she saw his truck, her face lit up. She ran to the door, and the teacher let her out. She climbed into the car seat and immediately started talking about her day. They made volcanoes out of baking soda and vinegar. Her friend Madison cried because she got paint on her favorite shirt. The class hamster escaped, and they found him in the reading corner eating a book. Ezra listened and made the right sounds at the right times, but his mind was somewhere else. On a woman who counted coins every morning. On lawyers and bodyguards and legal documents that said reinstatement. That night, after Poet was asleep, Ezra opened his laptop again. He searched for Marcus Torino. The results were extensive. One of the top civil litigation attorneys in California, specialized in complex financial cases, had argued before the state Supreme Court twice, won both times. There was a photo, mid-50s, gray hair, expensive suit, the kind of face that gave nothing away. The eyes were sharp, calculating. The face of someone who won because losing was not a possibility they entertained. Ezra clicked through more results. Client list was confidential. Case history was sealed. But there were news articles, settlements in the tens of millions, verdicts that changed corporate law, a reputation built on being ruthless, brilliant, and never cheap. If Vivian Ashford had hired Marcus Torino, she was not hiding anymore. She was preparing to fight. On day 36, booth 7 was empty. Ezra walked into Harlow's at 05:30, like he did every morning, scanned the room. Booth 7, against the back wall, window view, always occupied by 05:20. Empty. His chest tightened. He walked to booth 4 and sat down. Raina appeared with the coffee pot, her face creased with worry. She is never late. Ezra said nothing. He watched the door, watched the clock on the wall. 05:35, the whole 5:40, still empty. Raina poured his coffee and walked away. Came back 5 minutes later. You think she is okay? I do not know. She has never missed a day, not in 7 years. Ezra wrapped his hands around the coffee mug. The ceramic was hot enough to burn, but he did not let go. The door opened, not her. 4 men in black suits, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the kind of coordination that came from military training or close protection work. They wore earpieces, the wires visible against their necks. Their eyes swept the room in a practiced pattern, cataloging faces, exits, potential threats. The diner went silent. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Even the kitchen sounds seemed to quiet. Behind the 4 men came 2 more people, a man and a woman, both in their 40s, both wearing suits that cost more than most people in Harlow's made in a month. They carried briefcases, leather, monogrammed. The man was tall and lean with silver hair. The woman was shorter, precise, her heels clicking against the tile floor with metronomic rhythm. Behind them came Vivian Ashford, same gray cardigan, same worn shoes, same canvas bag clutched in her hands. But she was walking differently. Head up, shoulders back. The shuffle was gone. In its place was something that looked like what it had always been underneath. Discipline, training, the posture of someone who had been taught that how you carried yourself mattered more than what you wore. The entire diner stared. Gordon's fork clattered against his plate. The construction workers froze. Raina stood behind the counter with the coffee pot suspended in midair, her mouth slightly open. The silver-haired man walked directly to booth 7. He set his briefcase on the table and opened it with a smooth, practiced motion, pulled out a leather folio, turned to face Vivienne. His voice carried across the silent diner, clear and formal, the voice of someone who had delivered verdicts in courtrooms. Ms. Ashford, the ruling came through this morning. Federal Court of Appeals, 9th Circuit, unanimous decision. Vivienne stood near the door, flanked by 2 of the bodyguards. Her face was blank, but her hands were shaking. The man continued. The fraud conviction of the Ashford Holdings Executive Board stands. All assets unlawfully seized through fraudulent transfer, embezzlement, and corporate malfeasance are hereby restored to their rightful owner, you, effective immediately. He pulled a document from the folio, held it up so she could see the seal at the bottom. Federal Court. Official. Your board of directors has been notified. Your legal team is assembled. The transition of control begins today. All frozen accounts have been released. All seized properties have been returned to your name. All outstanding legal challenges have been dismissed. Vivian did not move, did not speak. The man turned the document toward her. This is the official order, signed by all 3 appellate judges. It cannot be appealed. It cannot be overturned. It is final. Gordon made a sound, something between a cough and a choke. The man ignored him. Vivian's voice was barely audible. How much? The woman in the suit stepped forward. She had a tablet in her hands. She swiped through screens with efficient precision. Total restored assets, including compound interest calculated from the date of seizure, recovered holdings, liquidated investments, and subsidiary portfolios. The current valuation, as of this morning, is $4.7 billion. The silence in the diner could have shattered glass. Raina's hand flew to her mouth. The coffee pot tilted, spilling dark liquid across the counter. She did not notice. Hale emerged from the back office, his face confused, then shocked, then something close to panic. Gordon stared, his mouth open, a piece of biscuit visible on his tongue. The construction workers sat frozen, their eyes wide. Vivian looked at the document, at the lawyers, at the bodyguards. Then she turned. Her eyes found Ezra. She walked toward booth 4. The bodyguards moved with her, maintaining position, their hands near their waistbands where weapons would be. They stopped 3 feet from the table. Vivian sat down across from Ezra, the same way she had sat in booth 7 every morning for 7 years. The lawyers remained standing, waiting. Vivian folded her hands on the table. The tremor was gone now. Her hands were steady. "You never asked my name." Ezra's throat was dry. "Didn't think you wanted me to." She nodded. "You were right." Her voice was different now. The gravel was still there, but underneath it was something else. Education, authority. The voice of someone who had commanded boardrooms. 7 years, Mr. Calloway. I have sat in this cafe every single morning, watching people, testing them. She paused. Her eyes were wet, but no tears fell, seeing who would look away. Everyone did, except you. Ezra's hands were clenched under the table, knuckles white. "You did not need my money. No." Her voice cracked. "I needed to know if kindness still existed when there was nothing to gain from it." She reached into her canvas bag, pulled out a Ziploc bag, not the one with coins, a different one. Inside were dozens of receipts, small pieces of paper, folded, creased, worn from being carried. She set the bag on the table between them. "Every one, every breakfast you paid for, every time you thought I did not notice. I kept them all." Ezra stared at the receipts, weeks of anonymous transactions, proof of something he had never wanted credit for. "You gave me something no lawyer could win back, no court could restore." "What?" Her voice broke. Proof that I was not invisible. Behind her, the silver-haired lawyer checked his watch. "Ms. Ashford, we have a board meeting at 1100 hours. Vivian did not look at him. One moment, she stood. The bodyguards moved closer. She looked down at Ezra. "Thank you, Ezra Calloway." He froze. "How do you know my name?" "I know everyone who is kind to me." She smiled, sad and tired. "There are not many." She turned toward the door, stopped, turned back. "Your custody hearing. 12 days. Ezra's heart stopped. "You will have the best family attorney in California. Pro bono. He will call you tonight. I cannot accept that. You already did. The moment you paid for breakfast you could not afford. The moment you stood up to that man." Her eyes flicked toward Gordon, who had gone pale. "The moment you taught your daughter that invisible people matter. I do not want charity, neither did I, but you gave it anyway." Her voice was firm now. "I am returning what you gave me. Dignity. The chance to keep going. You will not refuse." She walked to the door. The lawyers followed. The bodyguards maintained formation. At the threshold, she stopped one more time. "This cafe, I bought it this morning, along with the property it sits on. Raina is now the manager. Her salary has been tripled. The menu prices are cut in half, and booth 7 will remain empty. Always." Hale made a strangled sound. Vivian looked at him. "You are fired. You have 1 hour to clear your office." She walked out. The motorcade of black SUVs pulled away from the curb, tires crunching on gravel. The bell above the door chimed, and then she was gone. The diner erupted, voices overlapping, chairs scraping, phones coming out. Gordon was on his feet, his face red, stammering something about not meaning anything, about it all being a misunderstanding. Raina stood behind the counter, tears streaming down her face, her hands shaking. The construction workers were talking over each other, replaying what just happened, trying to make sense of it. Ezra sat in booth 4, staring at the Ziploc bag full of receipts. His phone buzzed. Unknown number, he answered. A voice, male, calm, professional. "Mr. Calloway, my name is Marcus Torino. I represent Vivian Ashford. She has retained my services on your behalf for the upcoming custody matter. I have reviewed your case. We will win. I will send a car to pick you up tomorrow at 1400 hours. We have work to do." The line went dead. Ezra set the phone on the table. His hands were shaking now. He pressed them flat against the vinyl, trying to steady himself. Raina appeared at his table. She was still crying, but she was smiling too. She bought the whole building, the whole lot. She said I could do whatever I wanted with it as long as booth 7 stays empty. Ezra looked at booth 7, the table where a woman had sat every morning for 7 years, counting coins, eating oatmeal, being invisible. The table that would now stay empty forever, a monument to the person no one saw. That night, Ezra could not sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the entire morning. The suits, the lawyers, the bodyguards. Vivian's voice, steady and sure, nothing like the quiet woman who had sat in booth 7. He thought about the Ziploc bag of receipts, about $4.7 billion, about a woman who had everything stolen from her and chose to disappear rather than fight in public, about a woman who spent 7 years testing humanity in a roadside diner, and about the fact that he had passed a test he did not know he was taking. His phone buzzed. A text from Sienna. "Heard you hired Marcus Torino. How can you afford that?" He did not reply. Another text. "This is not going to change anything. The court will see through whatever game you are playing." He turned the phone off. At 300, he got up and went to Poet's room. She was asleep, curled around her stuffed rabbit, her face peaceful. He stood in the doorway watching her breathe. He thought about losing her, about weekends only, about supervised visits, about another man being listed as her co-guardian, and for the first time in weeks, he let himself believe that maybe it would not happen. On day 37, Ezra went back to Harlow's. The diner looked the same cracked vinyl, same burnt coffee smell, same regulars in the same booths. But booth 7 was empty. Raina was behind the counter, her eyes red but clear. She smiled when she saw him. "Coffee, please." She poured, slid the mug across the counter. "On the house. Forever." Those were her instructions. Ezra shook his head. "I will pay. She will know. Let her." Raina smiled, stubborn, just like her. Ezra sat in booth 4, drank his coffee, watched the empty booth across the diner. Gordon was not there. Word was he had not come back after that morning. The construction workers were there, but they were quieter now, kept their eyes on their plates. A new face sat in Gordon's old spot. A woman in her 20s, thin, wearing clothes that had seen better days. She ordered oatmeal, no fruit. Raina brought her eggs and toast without being asked. The woman looked confused. "I did not order this. Someone did." Raina smiled. "Eat." The woman ate slowly, like she was afraid it would disappear. Ezra finished his coffee and stood to leave. Raina stopped him. "She left something for you. In the back." "What?" "Come see." He followed her to the storage room. On a shelf wrapped in plain brown paper was a small package. His name was written on it in precise handwriting. He opened it. Inside was a photograph. Black and white. A man in a military uniform, standing at attention. Navy. The uniform was old, from the 40s maybe. The man's face was young, serious, proud. On the back, in the same precise handwriting, "My father. He taught me that service is not about recognition. It is about showing up. Every day. Even when no one is watching. Especially then. Thank you for showing up. VA." Ezra stared at the photograph for a long time. Then he folded the paper back around it and put it in his jacket. At 1400 hours, a black car pulled up to his apartment. Not an SUV, a sedan, town car. The driver got out, opened the rear door. "Mr. Calloway. Mr. Torino is waiting." Ezra got in. The drive took 30 minutes. They went to a building downtown, glass and steel, the kind of place where people wore suits that cost more than cars. The driver led him to the top floor, to an office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. Marcus Torino stood behind a desk made of dark wood that looked like it had been cut from a single tree. He was exactly like his photograph. Silver hair, sharp eyes, a face that revealed nothing. He gestured to a chair. "Sit." Ezra sat. Torino opened a file. "Your case is not complicated. Your ex-wife believes she has leverage because of your career, unpredictable schedule, deployment risk. She has positioned herself as the stable option." He looked up. "She is wrong. We will prove it. Your service record is exemplary. Your dedication to your daughter is documented. Your ex-wife's new husband has a history we will use. Nothing illegal, but enough to shift the narrative." "What history?" Torino slid a document across the desk. 3 previous marriages, all ended in divorce. All involved disputes over stepchildren. The pattern is clear. He does not stay. Ezra read the document. "How did you get this?" "I am very good at my job." Torino closed the file. "The hearing is in 11 days. We will prepare. You will do exactly as I say. You will dress how I tell you. You will speak when I tell you. You will not deviate. Understood? Understood. Good. The car will pick you up every afternoon at this time until the hearing. We have a great deal of work to do." Ezra stood to leave. Torino stopped him. "Ms. Ashford asked me to tell you something. She said you would understand. She said, 'Some people save lives by running toward danger. Others save lives by paying attention. Both matter.'" Ezra nodded. He did not trust himself to speak. The car took him back to his apartment. Poet was with Sienna this week, so the place was too quiet. He sat at the kitchen table and stared at the photograph of Vivian's father, a man in uniform, standing at attention, showing up, even when no one was watching. On day 42, Ezra saw the news. It was on every channel, business networks, local stations, national coverage. Vivian Ashford. Returns billionaire heiress reclaims empire after 6-year legal battle. There was footage of her walking into the Ashford Holdings headquarters, flanked by lawyers and bodyguards. She wore a suit now, navy blue, perfect fit. Her hair was styled, her posture was commanding. She looked nothing like the woman in booth 7, but when the camera zoomed in, her eyes were the same. The reporter's voice was breathless. Vivian Ashford, sole heir to the Ashford industrial fortune, has officially reclaimed control of Ashford Holdings after a 6-year legal battle that saw her disappear from public life. The Federal Court of Appeals ruled unanimously in her favor, restoring assets valued at over $4 billion. Ms. Ashford has declined all interviews, but released a statement through her legal team. The screen cut to text. A prepared statement. Minimal, direct. Justice delayed is not justice denied. I am grateful to the courts, to my legal team, and to the few people who reminded me that dignity is not purchased. It is given freely or not at all. The coverage continued. Experts analyzing the case, financial analysts discussing the implications, speculation about what Ashford Holdings would do next. Ezra turned off the television. He thought about a woman sitting in a diner, counting coins, testing humanity. He thought about what it must have taken to walk away from billions, to live on the street, to eat oatmeal every morning while lawyers fought in court, to wait. On day 47, the custody hearing arrived. Ezra wore the suit Torino had selected, charcoal gray, white shirt, navy tie, polished shoes. He looked like someone else. Poet was in the courtroom, sitting with a social worker. She waved at him when he walked in. He waved back. Sienna sat on the other side with her lawyer and her new husband, Marcus. They did not look at him. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The hearing began. Sienna's lawyer went first. Presented the case for reduced custody. Unpredictable schedule. High-risk career. The possibility of deployment. The offer of stability from Sienna and her new husband. The lawyer was good, smooth, convincing. Then Marcus Torino stood. He did not raise his voice, did not gesture, did not perform. He simply dismantled every argument with surgical precision. He presented Ezra's service record, commendations, performance reviews, letters from commanding officers. He presented documentation of Ezra's time with Poet, school pickups, doctor appointments, parent-teacher conferences, every single one attended, never missed. He presented the history of Sienna's new husband, 3 marriages, 3 divorces, a pattern of conflict with stepchildren, and then he did something unexpected. He called a character witness. Raina walked to the stand. She testified about a man who came to a diner every morning, who paid for a stranger's breakfast for weeks, who never asked for recognition, who taught his daughter that invisible people mattered. Sienna's lawyer objected. Irrelevant. The judge overruled. I will allow it. Torino asked one question. In your 7 years working at that diner, how many people did what Mr. Calloway did? Raina's voice was clear. 1. Just him. Torino sat down. The judge reviewed the documents, asked a few questions, looked at Poet, looked at Ezra, then she ruled. Joint custody. 50-50, equal time, equal responsibility. Locked in until Poet turned 18, or circumstances materially changed. Sienna's face went white. Ezra closed his eyes. Poet ran to him when the judge dismissed them. He picked her up and held her while she wrapped her arms around his neck. Outside the courthouse, Torino shook his hand. You did well. Thank you. Ms. Ashford will be pleased. Tell her I said thank you. Tell her yourself. Torino handed him a card. She is hosting a small gathering next month. You are invited. Bring your daughter. Ezra took the card, looked at it. An address in La Jolla, a date, a time. He put it in his pocket. That night, he took Poet to Harlow's for dinner. It was the first time she had been there in the evening. The diner was quieter, softer light, fewer people. They sat in booth 4. Poet ordered pancakes. Ezra ordered coffee. She looked across the diner at booth 7. Why does not anyone sit there? Because it is a reminder. Of what? Of someone. Important. Who? Someone who taught me that the most important people are the ones nobody sees. Poet thought about this. Then she smiled, like the sad lady. Ezra nodded, exactly like her. Raina brought the pancakes, extra strawberries, whipped cream, on the house. Poet ate happily, syrup on her chin, telling him about school, about her friends, about the hamster that kept escaping. Ezra watched her and thought about how close he had come to losing this, to losing her. And he thought about a woman who had lost everything and chosen to spend 7 years in a roadside diner, waiting for justice, testing strangers, holding on to the one thing that could not be stolen: dignity. The kind you gave yourself by how you treated others when no one was keeping score. If you have ever felt invisible, if you have ever wondered whether small acts of kindness matter, leave a comment below. And if you believe that dignity is something we give each other, not something we earn, subscribe to this channel, because the final part of this story will show you what happened when 2 people who had lost everything discovered what they had been fighting for all along. The invitation sat on Ezra's kitchen counter for 3 weeks. Heavy cardstock, cream-colored, embossed lettering, an address in La Jolla, a date, a time, RSVP requested but not required. Poet walked past it every morning on her way to get cereal. On the 4th morning, she picked it up. What is this? An invitation? To what? A party. Can I come? It says you can. She set it back down, carefully aligned with the edge of the counter the way she had seen him do with his keys. Are we going? Ezra poured coffee into his mug, the same chipped one from Harlow's that Raina had let him keep. I do not know yet. Why not? Because sometimes accepting something means you owe something back. Poet considered this with the seriousness she brought to all his explanations. What would we owe? He did not have an answer. On day 63, Ezra finally called the number on the invitation. A woman answered on the 2nd ring. Professional, efficient. Ashford residence. This is Ezra Calloway. I received an invitation. Yes, Mr. Calloway. We have been expecting your call. Will you be attending? He looked at Poet, who was coloring at the table, her tongue pressed against her upper lip in concentration. Yes. 2 of us. Excellent. The event begins at 1500 hours. Attire is garden casual. Parking will be provided. Is there anything else you need? No. Thank you. We look forward to seeing you, Mr. Calloway. The line went dead. Poet looked up from her drawing. Are we going to see the sad lady? She is not sad anymore. How do you know? Because she got back what was taken from her. Poet thought about this. What was taken? Everything. The gathering was not what Ezra expected. He had imagined something formal, a mansion, waiters in white gloves, people in expensive clothes talking about things he did not understand. Instead, the address led to a property that overlooked the ocean, not a mansion, a house, large but not ostentatious. Modern lines, lots of glass, surrounded by gardens that looked carefully wild, native plants, stone pathways, the sound of water moving over rocks. There were perhaps 30 people scattered across the lawn and terrace. Some he recognized from news coverage, lawyers, business executives. A few faces that looked vaguely familiar from politics or philanthropy. But there were others too. A woman in jeans and a faded sweater. A man with paint-stained hands. A young couple with a baby. People who did not fit the pattern. Ezra parked where he was directed and walked with Poet toward the garden. She held his hand tightly, overwhelmed by the size of everything. A server approached with a tray of drinks. Sparkling water, juice, wine. Ezra took water. Poet took juice in a glass so fancy she held it with both hands. They walked through the garden slowly. Poet stopped to look at every flower, every stone, every small detail. Ezra let her set the pace. He was in no hurry to arrive anywhere. Then he heard a voice behind him. Mr. Calloway. He turned. Vivian Ashford stood on the pathway, wearing linen pants and a simple white blouse. Her hair was pulled back. No jewelry except a watch. She looked relaxed in a way he had never seen. The tension that had lived in her shoulders for 7 years was gone. Ms. Ashford, Vivienne, please. Poet hid behind Ezra's leg, suddenly shy. Vivienne knelt down slowly, bringing herself to Poet's eye level. You must be Poet. I have heard a great deal about you. Poet peeked out. Are you the sad lady? Vivienne smiled. I was. For a long time. But not anymore. Why were you sad? Because some people took something that did not belong to them, and it took a very long time to get it back. My daddy says taking is wrong. Your daddy is right. Vivian reached into her pocket and pulled out a piece of paper, folded into a small square. She unfolded it carefully. It was the drawing Poet had given her, the stick figure with the triangle dress and the 5-petaled flower. I have kept this with me every day since you gave it to me. It reminded me that even when things are hard, there are still people who see you. Poet's face lit up. You kept it? Of course I did. It was a gift. Vivian stood and looked at Ezra. Walk with me? They walked through the garden, Poet running ahead to examine a fountain shaped like stacked stones. The water ran over the edges in a continuous sheet, catching the afternoon light. Vivian stopped near a bench overlooking the ocean. This was my father's property. He bought it in the 50s, said it was the only place in California where you could hear yourself think, it is beautiful. I sold it when I disappeared, needed to liquidate everything so they could not trace me. Bought it back last month. First thing I did, they stood in silence, watching the water. Why did you disappear? Ezra asked. You could have fought publicly, could have stayed visible. Vivian's expression shifted, because fighting publicly meant becoming what they were, spectacle, performance. I wanted the truth to matter more than the show. 7 years is a long time to wait. It was not waiting, it was testing. She looked at him. I needed to know if I was right. About what? About whether people are fundamentally decent or fundamentally selfish. Whether kindness exists when there is no audience, no reward, no recognition. And you answered that question every morning for weeks. I did not do it for you to notice. I know, that is why it mattered. Poet ran back to them, breathless. There are koi fish in the pond. Can I feed them? Vivian smiled. There is food by the edge, small cups, just a pinch. Poet ran off again. Ezra watched her go. The custody hearing. The lawyer. I cannot repay that. You already did. Vivian's voice was firm. You gave me something priceless when I had nothing. I returned the favor. We are even. It does not feel even. That is because you are used to measuring value in dollars. I am measuring it in something else. What? The knowledge that I was right, that decency still exists, that people can choose to see each other even when it costs them something. She gestured toward the other guests scattered across the lawn. Everyone here is someone who helped me when I was invisible. Raina is here. She is talking to my head of operations about opening 3 more diners. The woman by the roses is a librarian who let me sit in the reading room for 6 years without asking questions. The man with the paint on his hands is an artist who gave me his jacket one winter when I was sleeping outside. Ezra looked around with new understanding. This is not a celebration. No, it is a thank you. To the people who did not look away. A bell chimed softly from the house. Vivian touched his arm. Stay. There is something I want to show everyone. The guests gathered on the terrace. Servers moved among them with trays of food. Simple things, sandwiches, fruit. Nothing extravagant. Vivian stood at the edge of the terrace, the ocean behind her. She did not raise her voice, but everyone quieted to listen. Thank you all for coming. I know some of you are wondering why you are here. You are here because you did something most people do not do anymore. You paid attention. You saw someone who needed help, and you helped without asking what you would get in return. She paused, looking at each person individually. For 6 years, I lived on the street. I slept in shelters. I ate in soup kitchens. I sat in libraries and laundromats and bus stations, and I watched. I watched how people treated the invisible, how they stepped over the homeless, how they avoided eye contact, how they pretended not to see. Her voice strengthened. Most people failed that test, but not you. Each of you in your own way chose to see, chose to help, chose to treat me like a human being when I had nothing to offer you in return. She gestured to the house behind her. This foundation is named for my father, the Ashford Foundation for Invisible Communities. Its mission is simple: to support the people and organizations that help those society ignores. Shelters, food banks, mental health services, job training, legal aid, and individuals, people like you, who do the work without recognition. Vivian pulled out a folder. Inside were envelopes. She began handing them out. Each of you will find a grant, not a loan, not a contract, a gift. Use it however you need. Start the business you have been dreaming about, pay off debt, go back to school, fund your organization. No strings, no reporting, just to thank you for being decent when decency was not required. The librarian opened her envelope. Her hand flew to her mouth. The artist stared at his, tears streaming down his face. Raina held hers against her chest, her shoulders shaking. Vivian came to Ezra last. She handed him an envelope. He opened it. Inside was a check, made out to the Poet Calloway Education Fund. $500,000. And beneath it, a letter. He unfolded it. The handwriting was the same as the note that had come with his father's photograph. Precise, controlled. Mr. Calloway, you taught your daughter that invisible people matter. This fund will ensure she never forgets that lesson. It will also ensure that she has the freedom to choose a life of service if she wishes, because the world needs more people like you. People who show up, who pay attention, who choose kindness when no one is keeping score. Thank you for reminding me that those people still exist. V.A. Ezra folded the letter carefully, looked up. Vivian was watching him. He nodded once, she nodded back. No words were necessary. The gathering continued into the evening. People talked, ate, shared stories. The artist showed Vivian sketches he had made of the city. The librarian talked about expanding the reading programs. Raina described her plans for the new diners, how each one would have a booth that stayed empty. A reminder. Poet fell asleep on a bench near the fountain, her head on Ezra's lap. He sat with one hand on her shoulder, watching the sun set over the ocean. Vivian sat down beside him. She looks like you. People say that. She is lucky to have you. I am lucky to have her. They sat in comfortable silence. The sky turned orange, then pink, then purple. What will you do now? Ezra asked. With Ashford Holdings? Vivian considered the question. Transform it. We made industrial equipment. Useful things, but not meaningful things. I am going to shift focus. Green energy, affordable housing, infrastructure for underserved communities, things that matter, that will cost money. I have plenty of money. What I needed was a reason to use it. She looked at him. You gave me that. You and everyone here. You reminded me what wealth is actually for. Not accumulation, not status, but impact. The ability to make things better for people who cannot make things better for themselves. The stars were coming out now. Poet stirred but did not wake. There is one more thing, Vivian said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. Opened it. Inside was a key. This is for you. What is it? A key to booth 7. Symbolic, obviously. But I had it made anyway. Vivian smiled. Because that booth belongs to you now. You are the one who decides what it means. Ezra took the key. It was heavy, old-fashioned, the kind that looked like it came from a different era. Why? Because you understand what I learned. That the most important seat at any table is the one reserved for the person nobody expects to see, the person everyone else walks past, the person who tests whether we are paying attention. She closed the box. Keep showing up, Ezra. Keep teaching your daughter to see the invisible, because the world needs people like that, now more than ever. A month later, Ezra walked into Harlow's at 05:30 hours. Same time, same routine. The diner looked different. Raina had renovated, new paint, new floors. The booths were repaired, the vinyl replaced, but booth 7 remained exactly as it was, cracked, worn, empty. A small bronze plaque was mounted on the wall beside it. This booth remains empty in honor of those who are overlooked. May we always remember to see. Ezra sat in booth 4. Raina brought coffee without asking. You know she calls me every week, Raina said. Asks how things are going, if the diner is okay, if the people are okay. Does she ask about booth 7? Every time. Raina smiled. Wants to make sure it stays empty. It will. I know. Ezra drank his coffee and watched the morning unfold. A new person sat where Gordon used to sit. A young man, early 20s, nervous energy, checking his phone every few seconds. Waiting for a job interview, probably. Hoping for a break. Raina brought him coffee and a muffin. On the house. The young man looked confused. I did not order this. Someone wanted you to have it. Who? Does it matter? The young man ate slowly, gratefully. Ezra finished his coffee and left the money under his mug. More than the bill, enough to cover someone else's breakfast. He drove to the daycare. Poet was awake in the back seat, humming. Daddy, can we go back to the lady's house sometime? Maybe. Why? Because she was nice. And the garden was pretty. She was nice. Ezra looked at her in the rearview mirror. What did you think about what she said? About invisible people? Poet thought about this. I think everyone should be visible. Me too, sweetheart. At the daycare, he walked her to the door. She hugged him tight, her arms around his neck. Love you, Daddy. Love you too. He watched her run inside, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Then he drove to the base. Training was hard. It was always hard. But today he pushed through it with something he had not felt in months. Purpose, clarity. The knowledge that what he did mattered, not because of rank or recognition, but because showing up mattered. That evening, he picked Poet up, and they drove to the beach. They sat on the sand and watched the waves. She built castles. He watched her build them and thought about foundations, about what lasted, about what mattered. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Thank you for coming to the gathering. Your presence meant more than you know. VA. He typed a reply. Thank you for the reminder. That small acts matter. 3 dots appeared, then a response. They always did. We just forget to pay attention. Ezra put the phone away. Poet ran up with a shell, her eyes wide. Look, it is perfect. He examined the shell. Spiral pattern, smooth edges, no cracks. You are right, it is perfect. Can I keep it? Of course. She put it in her pocket carefully, like it was treasure. They stayed until the sun went down. Then they drove home, and he made dinner. Spaghetti, her favorite. They ate together at the small table in their small kitchen, and she told him about her day, about the hamster, about her friend who lost a tooth, about the book they read in class. He listened to every word. After dinner, after bath time, after stories and songs, and the complicated ritual of getting a 5-year-old to sleep, Ezra sat in his living room with a beer he did not drink. He thought about Vivienne, about 7 years in a diner, about choosing invisibility, about testing humanity. He thought about the people at the gathering, the librarian, the artist, Raina, all of them doing small things, unremarkable things, things that only mattered if you were paying attention. He thought about booth 7, empty now, forever, a reminder. The next morning, Ezra walked into Harlow's at 5:30, sat in booth 4, drank coffee, watched the diner wake up. A woman came in, older, worn clothes. She counted coins before ordering. Ezra watched her, saw himself 6 months ago, saw the choice. He left extra money under his mug. Raina saw it, smiled, brought the woman eggs and toast. The pattern continued, because some things were worth repeating, because some lessons were worth learning over and over, because kindness was not a single act. It was a practice, a discipline, a choice made every day when no one was keeping score. On the wall beside booth 7, the bronze plaque caught the morning light. This booth remains empty in honor of those who are overlooked. May we always remember to see. Ezra finished his coffee, left the diner, drove to drop off Poet. She waved goodbye from the window. He waved back. And then he went to work, showing up, paying attention, seeing the invisible, the way his daughter had taught him, the way Vivienne had reminded him, the way the world needed him to. Every single day. Years later, when Poet was older, she would ask him about booth 7, about why it stayed empty, about what it meant. And he would tell her the truth, that once, a woman who had everything lost it all, and instead of fighting for recognition, she disappeared. She sat in a diner every morning, testing whether people were fundamentally good or fundamentally selfish. And one person proved they were good, not because he wanted credit, not because he expected anything in return, but because he believed that invisible people mattered, that small acts mattered, that showing up mattered, and that belief changed everything, for both of them. Poet would understand, because she had been raised to see, to pay attention, to choose kindness when no one was keeping score, and someday she would teach her own children the same lesson. That dignity was not something you earned, it was something you gave, freely, without expectation, to the people no one else saw, because those were the people who mattered most. Have you ever done something kind for someone without expecting anything in return? Have you ever been that invisible person who desperately needed someone to see you? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if this story reminded you of the power of small acts and quiet decency, consider subscribing. Because there are more stories like this. Stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when no one is watching. Stories that remind us who we want to be.